I'm noticing that I'm going to be giving a spirited talk in front of the generosity tree, which is beautiful. Oh, it's so great to see everyone. What a wonderful day so far. So I have a little bit of time, and I wanted to share a few stories. And they're all on my journey and how it intersects with these themes that we're all practicing as well as we can around generosity. In some ways, I would say that the last few years for me has been a story of struggle. I'm somebody who refuses to believe that the practices that we're all talking about here, generosity, compassion, altruism, wonderful spirit inside, is something that we do on nights and weekends and when we're with our families, but not at other times, which happen to take up most of our waking lives. That's been a very difficult thing for me. I refuse to say that, no, I'm just going to leave that aside in this part of my life. So I've been going through experiments of what it means to refuse and to say, what can I do in some small ways to play around with the common assumptions that we all tend to hold as a society on what it means to be involved in business, as Laura was saying. So my work right now is in investment. But rather than investing in any company, I tend to invest in socially minded companies or environmentally minded companies, whatever that means. So earlier this year, as I've been diving deeper into my own journey of unconditional giving and what that means for me, I started to realize that the way that I thought about socially minded business was changing. That if, in fact, I'm asking for anything in return, if I'm not operating from love myself, then maybe I can go deeper in terms of what it means to have a socially minded heart. So I walked into my boss's office one day. This was in February or March of this year. And I said, I don't believe in a transactional relationship with you anymore. It had taken 3 years to get there. But I said that rather than have a quid pro quo between myself and my employer, I would rather have a trust-based relationship, a love-based relationship if possible. So from this day forward, I would like to tear up my employment contract, and I'm just going to come to work every day. And you can pay me if you want, or not, and you have to decide. I'm actually going to come here for free. It's from love. And so he looked at me and he just did not understand what I was saying. This is ridiculous. And there were other people in the room and he said, no. And then he said, and let me tell you why. You can't think far enough ahead. You can't pay your rent, Birju, if I don't pay you. I said, well, I didn't say don't pay me. Right? I said, why don't you receive a gift? And what does it mean to receive a gift? There's an obligation. We understand that we are part of a family now. And in a family, there's a whole different set of interaction with one another. I don't want to get rich from money anymore. I want to get rich in wealth, which is family, which is love, which is community, ecology, all of these things that we hold dear. So he followed up again. He said, no, but how will you pay your rent? And I looked at him and it was quite emotional for me because this is not an easy conversation. And at the time, I didn't know what he would say. And I said, you know, the fact that you're asking me that question tells me that you love me. And this is an investment banker that I'm saying this to. And I said, I'm willing to bet that what comes out of our relationship because you love me and I love you is very different than what would come if I had a contract that said you have to pay me this on the second and fourth Sunday of every month. And that was a bold leap in some ways for me. It was not something I felt very comfortable to do, and yet I tried it anyways, and it came with its own ups and downs. I would love to tell you that when you take that leap of faith, everything is roses and things just work out. But it took a long time to get there. And once I got there, I didn't know if he would pay me every month. And I did have rent to pay. And the impact that it had on me was pretty significant. I ended up losing a lot of weight out of stress, almost 20 kilograms worth of weight, just from worrying, right? Because my own transformation needed to happen. Can I actually live with whatever will happen when I engage in love? But other things also happened that I couldn't count on. One day my boss came to me, he said, so how did you get to even think like this? And I said, well, I'm doing all of these small practices. One of them is a 21-day kindness challenge. You do something nice every day for 3 weeks. He said, okay, if you're willing to say this kind of stuff to me, then I'm willing to try this. So my entire company, and in fact another company that I also work with, decided to do a 21-day kindness challenge together. I'm saying the people with the money, the secretaries, the people who are researchers, everyone together. And every week we come together and we do a reflection session. Tell us stories. What happens when you practice unconditional generosity as an investment banker? So one of my coworkers comes up one day in our reflection session. She says, you know, one day I was coming home from the train station and I got 3 silver dollar coins as change for my train ticket. Usually I just put it in my pocket, right? That's what you do. And this time she said, instead of doing that, I'm going to practice kindness and generosity. We'll see what happens. So the first coin she went and she gave to a homeless person. The second coin, she thought of her grandmother. She said, when my grandmother and grandfather first got married, their first income was in the form of silver dollars. And she remembered that and she mailed that silver dollar to her grandmother and she said, this reminded me of you. And then the third one, she met a gentleman, another investor, and she was telling him that this is what we're trying to do. We're practicing kindness. And then she gave him the silver dollar. Why don't you pay it forward however you like? Within 1 week, you wouldn't believe it, and she actually found, for some odd reason, this has never happened to her, she had 4 silver dollars in her pocket 1 week later, even though she gave away 3 over the course of the week. And she thinks about it, she just found it. You know, 2 she found on the ground, 1 somebody just came up and handed it to her, and she said, this never happens to me. This week, 4 silver dollars in my hand. That return on investment is high. 25%, you know, or 33%. I'm a good banker. And yet she said, actually, that's not the full return, because when I sent that envelope to my grandmother, she wrote back to my entire family. She said, oh my goodness, I can't believe that my granddaughter has thought of me in such a way. I feel so filled with love. I want everyone to be filled with love. Her whole family was taken in by the spirit of generosity. And when they had a reunion later in the month, guess who was the hero? Similarly, she told her coworker, this person who she met on the street, who not only handed her 2 in return, but decided to start taking that on in his own life. And so her relationship with him started to change. And so we notice that when we start practicing these little things in the workplace, they start rippling out in ways that I don't even know. Is it worth 20 kilograms of my own weight loss to experience what happens there? It's not an equation that I can even think of. But the reason that I decide to do it is it doesn't matter what it is. I need to practice love, whatever that means for me in this given moment. And very interestingly, as we started doing this, we found that other people wanted to join. So what is happening right now is there's about a half dozen different organizations where we're all coming together and asking, why is it that a social business is how many mouths you feed and how many trees you plant, but how much change is happening inside is not important. In fact, we don't even ask the question. This is not important. And that's not what we stand for. As investors, we say, well, in fact, we're trying to be the change. We're doing small acts of kindness ourselves. So if we do that, we also want to work with other people who are doing the same thing. Can we start a movement of kindness in business? Or really, inner transformation in business? And we're starting to experiment with that. If I look back at 9 months ago and I say, well, is that going to happen? Is it worth it? Should I decide that I'm just going to offer myself to my boss? There's no way that I could have thought of this happening. And I still don't know from a standpoint of positives and negatives if it's actually worth it, right? Because these are edges. I'm telling you real-time things that are happening right now and the world hasn't changed yet. And yet, I feel so alive. I feel more wealthy with less money. And I know that in this audience, that's something that is very common amongst all of us. So thank you for letting me share. I appreciate the space.